friends. It's Rich from God is Near, and today we're looking at our podcast at Wes Huff. He's an apologist and biblical expert. He went on the Flagrant podcast. So we're going to go through different questions. They ask a ton of questions on there, and I just appreciate him. He's somebody who's very well versed on ancient texts and stuff. That's his expertise. There's one about this guy asks about discrepancies in the Bible and how do you deal with those?
On the like some of the discrepancies that occur in the Bible. That's something that I struggle with sometimes.
Sure.
I as a Catholic, we have a little broader, papal authority. But I'm curious, like, how should Christians deal with discrepancies in the Bible, whether it's like the birth story or like the death of Judas or things like that?
Yeah.
What do you mean by discrepancies? Can you explain
So there are
some of those?
differentiations in detail because we have four gospels. They
Yeah,
all
explain what the
tell-
Gospels are to the people out there like me.
Yeah. To good Catholics like you. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are these biographies of Jesus' life. So two of them claim to be written by eyewitnesses. Matthew is Levi the tax collector, and John is the disciple, John. Luke and Mark are not. So Luke is a traveling companion of Paul, who writes this twofold document, Luke and Acts. And then Mark is, in the earliest church tradition, he's a traveling companion of Peter. So he gets his source information from Peter, which is really interesting in the fact that Peter does not look good in Mark.
So he's taking a little tangent here from the actual original question, but this is good information as well as far as thinking about the Gospels and if there are different variations and details in the Gospels.
Like that's where get behind me, Satan. He's the disciple. Like he's continually not getting what Jesus is saying, and he like runs away, denies Jesus. So if the earliest source material is true, which I think we have no reason not to think it is, especially because they don't then call it the Gospel of Peter, which they could if they're like, well, this is Peter's source information. They call it the Gospel of Mark, who Mark's generally a nobody. That only gives credibility to the fact that Mark probably wrote it, and then it has this connection directly with Peter himself. So four Gospels, two are claimed to be eyewitnesses who wrote them, and then two claim to be like associates.
Secondhand,
yeah. So when the church is looking at all this literature and they're saying, okay, we have an Old Testament. Like testamentum just means covenant. Diatheke in the Greek, you just translate it into Latin, and it's testament. The Old Testament, God's covenants are always followed up by written texts. So that's why they collected. You have guys like Philo and Josephus. They talk about this stuff. What are the books? And then the Christians see Jesus. He establishes a new covenant. He's fulfilling what the prophet Jeremiah said in Jeremiah 31:31, where he says, I'm going to make a new covenant with my people. I'm going to write my law in their hearts. Jesus claims to fulfill those things. And then the early Christians who are Jews, who believe in Jesus as the Messiah, are saying, okay, here's the covenant, here's the promise, where are the written texts? And so they have these conversations of canonicity, which just means like, canon in Greek means a rule. So it's the standard. You have like a Harry Potter canon, and then you have stuff that's not, or Star Wars canon, or Lord of the Rings canon, whatever. So the canon of Scripture, and they're saying, okay, what's in, what's out?
What's in, what's out. And these are all the stories about Jesus and his teachings at the time, first-hand account, second-hand account, third-hand account, some are some rumors, and they have to go through, parcel through to find what has the most efficacy?
Yeah, so what the conversations they're having is, what are the documents that are either from someone who knew Jesus or someone who knew Jesus?
How did we get the Bible? How do we get the Bible, the canon? So it's where he's bringing up the canon. So how did they say this book is in, like the book of Hebrews or the book of James? That one was argued about, the book of Romans. So how did those get in? And then there's certain other books that were not recognized as the Protestant canon. There are the pseudepigrapha and apocrypha, but those are not recognized as the same level of authority as the Protestant Bible.
Yeah, it's either what is it, empirical evidence or like what is one derivative away from that?
Yeah, and for the Gospels in particular, like these four biographies of Jesus' life, they're the ones that the early Jesus community agrees upon the most because the disciples of Jesus had disciples. They're called the apostolic fathers.
Right.
So there were people who like Peter and John and Paul discipled themselves. And then those people talk about, okay, I heard John say this. I heard, and they give credibility. So there's this like direct chain of succession and line of custody to the apostolic community. And sometimes they tell the same stories, but they give different angles on the stories.
The fact that they differ slightly and they don't make the changes to make them match up offers more authenticity to me.
Well, I would say
if you're going to change it, change it. It's the outside perspective from like an atheist, perhaps. And on the societal utility, or not even societal, but like how the power structure uses religion, right? So, but I'm like, well, okay, well, that's not a really good one if you're putting quote unquote mistakes or differences. You're like, unless they thought it was important to maintain the authenticity of these stories, so they left them in there despite the differences.
Well, if they all said the same thing, you could accuse them of collaborating and collusion.
Maybe that was a really quick way of saying what I've babbled about.
That's why you brought me on.
Yeah,
it's good. It's good.
Yeah,
That's what he's saying, collusion. As far as that's and even if you listen to police officers, so J. Warner Wallace, if you haven't looked at him, look at some of his stuff up. I'll probably do some videos about him. Then he was a police officer, and he does cold cases investigation. He's famous for that, and so he's a Christian. He converted to Christianity. He was an atheist, and when he's talking about looking at different people's testimonies and stuff, if that's why the police separate people and then get their statements instead of having them all together. So they're going to have so and so, person A, B, C. They're going to have them tell their story of what happened, and then if there's some slight differences, but the main gist of the story is the same, then they realize that it's accurate. If all the stories are exactly the same, there's no other details that is exactly the same. It's very short. Then they know that they've collaborated to get a story straight. And so that's where they start looking to pit them against each other and stuff to try to get the real story because it's a rehearsed fabrication.
So the Gospels are writing to different authors with different intentions, writing to different audiences. So some of them are clearly writing to Jewish audiences, and so they're capitalizing on certain things.
For example,
so Matthew is making this connection between Jesus being the new David and the new Moses. So he's doing certain things in his Gospel where he's capitalizing on aspects of Jesus's life, so he gives a different genealogy than Luke does for Jesus's ancestry. So some people look at that and they're like, well, this is a problem. You got two genealogies of Jesus. But what we know about genealogies, particularly Jewish genealogies, is that sometimes they're not meant to be either exhaustive or gapless.
What does that mean?
So we today, if I'm doing a family tree, I'm going to make sure that everybody's listed, right? Grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather. The ancient Hebrews are more concerned with the right people being named for the right reasons. And they also have this idea that's called gematria, where every letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a number associated with it, and your name ends up having a number. So David ends with the number 14, if you count up the things. Matthew's gospel starts with a genealogy that has 3 lists of 14. Ending with Jesus. And the point of that, and we know that it's not like he leaves people out because we can go back to First and Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles, where we have longer lists of these people. And Matthew is leaving people out, or he's squishing whole generations in just one person. So you could look at that and say, in our modern mindset, well, that's playing loose and fast with the data. But an ancient Jew would say, okay, well, why is this happening? You have lists of 14, that's David. And so to his audience, he's communicating, this is the new David. Okay. And he's doing things that are fulfilling the expectation of who David should be, as the king, as the anointed one. And you have things like Moses goes up on a mountain and receives the law. Jesus goes up on a mountain and gives the law, a new law, right? And so throughout the Gospel of Matthew, you have these constant insertions that are capitalizing on details for his audience to make sure that they know this guy Jesus is this person who is the person you're waiting for. He's fulfilling the Davidic reign. He's the prophet like Moses that's predicted back in the Torah, and he's accomplishing these things.
Is this what you mean when you say the Bible is written for you but not to you?
I like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Because it has a different audience, right? And so understanding the context helps you. That's why the German rationalists in the 18th and 19th centuries they did the wrong thing. They said, this is how we would write, therefore. And they didn't look back because there's linguistic and cultural levels to it.
Yeah.
Right? So you could just translate the text directly, but it's context that's going to tell you the difference between a butt dial and a booty call.
If there are discrepancies in the Bible that you don't understand, then let's look to try to understand them instead of automatically dismissing the Bible as full of errors. I've heard a lot of people, I think that's a common misconception that they say that there's a lot of errors in the Bible. And then I've asked people before, oh yeah, there's a lot of errors in the Bible. I was like, really? Well, what are some? What's the top one that bothers you? Because maybe I know the answer to it as far as I've researched that particular thing, and then many times they don't have a particular one. It's just something that they've heard people say about the Bible, and they repeat or parrot it. They haven't actually looked at the Bible and studied it for themselves. I have some more videos, and hopefully this is helpful. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, and I'd welcome any comments that you have and down below. Continue the discussion if you want to say anything down below. That would be great as well. And share this video with a friend. Thanks for watching. God is near. We'll see you next time.